All right, we're live. We're live.
Yes.
I love it. Welcome, everyone. I'm Melani Gordon. This is David Sheckman, and we have an amazing three-part series, Identity is Destiny. We're so excited. And I'm Mel Gordon. Everyone calls me Mel. I'm a previous recovering CEO, owner, and operator of a tech startup with a successful exit. And David?
I am still a coach, not quite in recovery yet. Been doing this for about a quarter of a century, got in through the family business, very unusual way to do that. I love the work, I love my clients, and I'm excited to share some experiences.
Yeah. So David and I met probably close to a year and a half ago, and we are both consultants and coaches at a firm called Evolution. And gosh, Evolution's been around for about 10 years, and we have worked with big names such as Slack and Twitter and Snap and Glassdoor and so many more. And David and I are two of the now, I believe, 50 full-time partners over at
58.
58.
Mhm.
Yes. So David's a senior partner. He's been there from the early days, and I joined about a year and a half ago. And as you can tell, we have great energy. And so this is our three-part series that we've been excited to deliver to you all. So we're going to be diving in. This is our first episode and around company identity. So we have some great examples, and we'll be asking questions back and forth. Again, these are live, so if you're showing up here, please feel free to shoot us your questions. And we're really just going to kick things off. I know, David, when we were chatting a little bit yesterday as we were preparing for this, you had mentioned one of the authors and books that had really started to spark this idea for this series for you. A lot of the work you've done over the last 2 decades, and of course, a lot of the work that I've tried to execute and implement on in my own company over the last 2 decades. But I'd love to pass it over to you and just hear a little bit more about that author and the themes there that really show up for you.
Absolutely, Mel. Thank you for that warm introduction. I'm so glad that we're in the same system together with Evolution. We're doing this work, and that we have a chance now to share some nuggets of wisdom with the broader LinkedIn community and beyond. Yeah, I want to pick up on what you just mentioned about some really source material a number of years ago that hit me like a lightning bolt and has been with me ever since. I'm sure everyone watching and listening has had the experience of coming across some content that is not only fascinating, but it feels timeless in its wisdom and impact. I had that experience a number of years ago reading the book called The Living Company by Arie de Geus. He's a Dutch leader, former leader of Shell, the oil and gas company. And he was part of a pretty elaborate and extensive project commissioned by that organization a number of years ago to look at what not only leads to broad and robust success with an organization, but what allows it to endure a sustainable experience as an organization that lasts a long time. In fact, longer than the lifespan of a human, of a person, which is in, varies by country, but in most of the developed world would be kind of mid 70s to mid 80s. What really helps an organization endure and sustain beyond the life cycle of one person? And of course, as you can imagine, there are a number of factors that go into that. But the one that really got my attention and that has been a big part of the work that I do now and moving and certainly moving forward is about a cohesive and clear identity. And that sounds, I think, very straightforward and maybe obvious to some people, but it's enormously challenging for a whole host of reasons.
Sure.
But what I think is the most fascinating and in some ways counterintuitive implications of that message is that a fixed, clear, and unambiguous identity actually helps organizations be more flexible and adaptive to the environment.
Mm. And I know, you say identity, and one of the things that came up for me was, is that mission, vision, value, core values and the posters that hang on the wall, and I could also see where people just think that's external branding, right? And kind of get tripped up in that. So I get curious about that. Can it be both? Is it one or the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. Identity can be a sort of amorphous term to a lot of people. And that's a good question. Does this show up as a document, as a meeting system, as some sort of process? And what I would say is the short answer is it's all of that.
Mhm.
However, what I think is most important in looking at this, and there's so many metaphors people use, but you really look at like, what is this company? What does it stand for?
Mhm. And you have some good examples because you have nearly what, 2 decades? I know we're both only 27, but, we have enormous amounts of big system examples and smaller system examples, but, maybe talk a little bit about one of the big systems that you've been in for a while that has embraced this.
That's great. Yeah, I could talk about theories and ideas all day, but I think what's most important is how does this practically look
Mhm.
in a client situation in a real world example. So, want to give some story here about a long term client relationship that I've had. And not only am I grateful for having regular contact with this organization and being an ongoing trusted advisor and resource, but it's also allowed me to see identity in work and identity in action, and that it's not just about a sort of temporary statement someone puts up or a task force or a work group, but it's really about a long-term connection to the source of who a firm is. So this is in the financial services world. It's a Fortune 100 company. It's been very successful in its industry, but that industry has experienced a lot of significant change in the world that we're in. When I began working with this organization, it was a insurance company, and it primarily operated in that space and sold policies, accounts, help people with accounts, really around that particular suite of products. And
Mhm.
as the regulatory landscape changed, and there were opportunities for these organizations to do more than simply sell one portfolio of products, they were able to engage in more comprehensive planning for the marketplace and for clients who wanted to work with this organization. Now, that sounds like it's incredible blue sky opportunity. That's phenomenal. Can't wait to get involved. Look at all the money, look at all the opportunities, look at the pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. What I observed, though, was most of the other organizations who had this opportunity not only did not succeed at the level of my particular client, but they really struggled and went backwards. So more opportunity led to less success.
Mhm.
In my client's situation, though, led to that difference.
Yeah.
And my experience was it was a firm identity. I don't want to go through reading an entire mission statement, but there's a very, very old mission statement that is still alive and
Mhm.
kicking with this organization. And it's about quality over quantity and doing work that is in our policy owners' best interest.
'Cause it sounds like before it was very transactional and quantity, right? The more is better, very transactional and volume based.
Well, this organization has really tried to be quality driven and to put the needs of the clients first.
Yeah.
The competition I'll embrace that sort of idea, but I think really fell prey to that transactional model. And as new opportunities emerged, they went wholesale into that, chasing dollars, chasing short-term revenue, finding ways of cutting corners, doing less for their field force and their employees, and maximizing short-term profits.
And
so
don't you
what
think
you're talking about was actually embraced by that competition. And what I saw with this organization was the application of quality, the application of doing what's right for clients. And that sounds great. And I think everyone on their best day wants to do that or some version of that. But the execution of that requires courage, requires trade-offs.
And a bit of that gets complicated or friction when the business model is set up such that a financial services firm is making more money off of, the bigger numbers, the more right? And so those are in conflict.
Absolutely. What I think you're talking about that, I was hinting at earlier, is a series of challenging decisions about resources, about tolerance for behavior and conduct of its employees, and about the ability to do what's right, even if it costs them in the short term.
Yeah,
and
100%.
The ability to do that is sourced in identity.
Yeah.
And that is the connection that is so incredibly challenging to do.
And in this example, what has been the timeline or the time period of this journey for this particular client?
Yeah, well, it's a very old institution. So a lot of the identity was set in the latter part of the 19th century, if you can actually believe it. Wow. But what I think is so powerful is that it really does align with the message from the book I was referencing earlier, The Living Company. Gotcha. And just to step back for a moment, what that book and what its research and its discussions help readers see is that there are some organizations around the world, in Japan, in Finland, in other countries, where organizations have actually been at work for 700 years, 800 years. They're doing work now that wasn't even technically possible when they started. But the essence, the connection to who we are has endured as political, technical, social landscapes have evolved and changed. Yeah. And that has created an enduring sense of mission. So coming back to my client, the real sourcing of this goes back even to the post-Civil War era in America. But what it has allowed them to do is make challenging decisions at crossroads moments to embrace who they are, organize people towards a common effort, and create a real sense of shared mission with the effort. And that has yielded not just a sense of being strong in the marketplace, but in absolutely vanquishing the competition and entering new markets and competing at high levels in those. This organization won the life insurance game and is now beating incumbents, long-term incumbents in wealth management. And that was only possible, in my experience and my exposure to this work, by being true to who they were and not selling out for short-term results, for big personalities, or for some sort of gimmicky way of juicing the books.
Yeah. And I just dropped that in the book again that David's referencing is The Living Company. I haven't yet picked it up, and I'm excited to do so. I think one of the things that comes up for me in terms of, customer centric versus growth centric and the contrast, and, the biggest company name I think of is Facebook, right? And if, anyone who's listening in has followed them enough to know, that they've been growth at all costs, right? And sometimes at the expense of privacy and user experience. We both, David and I, share a love of Kara Swisher. And if you haven't read her latest book, Burn Book, so Kara Swisher's Burn Book, she quoted here, Mark Zuckerberg may have reshaped the digital world, but his decisions have caused serious societal harm, which I share the same philosophy. And Kara Swisher also goes on to describe him as, quote, one of the most damaging man in tech, due to Facebook's role in misinformation and privacy violations. And I mean, the number one thing we can point to because of that, David, is the business model of more eyeballs and growth at all cost. And so, I just, I love the conversation we're having and putting that at the forefront, and you speaking about these organizations, but that have been running for, how many centuries and years. It's just, I'm excited to be talking about this more, because I feel like anymore, all we're hearing about is Elon Musk at Twitter and how shitty of a CEO Mark Zuckerberg is. And right. It's like, great, if that's what makes them sleep at night, but holy moly.
Absolutely.
It's not working, right? They're not, solving the problems. And I'm almost done with the book. I'm going to go back and reread it, because the stories that she shares when, back in the early 2000s, when we thought, oh, these guys are all going to save the world. Now, look, some of them are, right? Some of them are, but yeah.
Well, I think you're raising a really important point here too, that is not just about long-term sustainability, but it's also about short-term impact.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I do a lot of work in the technology space. Evolution does a great deal of work in that area, and technology is allowing us to stream this conversation right now. Technology is playing a huge role in both of our lives and everyone's life in new and exciting ways, and it's also being weaponized in unprecedented ways that are having incredible impacts, some very positive, some very negative, and some that are extraordinarily mixed. And again, I think that's rooted in identity. What's the purpose of this company? If the purpose of this company is, growth at all costs, is disrupting people's lives to the point of chaos, violence, and social breakdown, or the breakdown of the social order, that requires for me a real strong look in the mirror and say, yes, what do I stand for? What do we stand for? And is our technology being weaponized in a way that's bringing harm?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, I love your technology example of Apple, right? That, I mean, a lot of people might know it, but I think it's worth mentioning, because we have the contrast of your client in financial services to Mark Zuckerberg, which me and my friends and family have different names for him. And then you look back at one of the greatest leaders, arguably of all time, and, in our lifetime, but also potentially in history, who is Steve Jobs.
Of course. Yeah, that I think it's a great contribution to this conversation, because there's so many aspects of that story of the founding of Apple and the growth of Apple that, it's like a thrilling sort of novel to go through. But so much of the identity conversation that I often have with people is about sustainability and navigating the ups and downs of things. But I think what's also worth mentioning is that often the launch, the product market fit, the early stages of a startup is as defined by identity as anything else. So it's not just about, long term, what are we gonna be doing decades from now, but it's about how do we really claim our space in the marketplace and launch. And I don't want to go through the whole story, but I think many people remember either from reading biographies about Steve Jobs or kind of seeing documentaries about Apple, that Apple hasn't really invented much. But what they've been able to do is take technology that other people didn't really know what to do with or didn't know how to apply or didn't feel comfortable with, and for one reason or another, and make it sing in the marketplace. And to me, that goes to a core fundamental identity of Apple, which is let's blend art and science to make this technology real for the average consumer.
And they've gotten criticized for that in the past and all the different documentaries that exist. And oh my God, it was really Xerox. It's like, well, if we were to dive into the documentary of Xerox, right, you'd be like, well, gosh, someone needed to pick that innovation up and do something with it, right?
That's right. So the super short history of that is Xerox PARC. So the Xerox East Coast company had a little kind of innovation lab in Silicon Valley called Xerox PARC. And the people there were creating graphical user interface, the mouse, and all of these, different ways of accessing personal computers that hadn't existed before, when you just had Unix code and, people are typing in command prompts and all of that, which kept a lot of personal computing to a very narrow slice of the public at that point, of people who were willing to do that work, willing to engage with computers that way. But they didn't really, the mothership for Xerox wasn't all that interested, and the people there didn't really know what to do with it. Well, Apple figured out what to do with it. Apple figured out that this was a gateway for people who weren't engineers and didn't work in information services or IT to be able to access the powerful computing power of what that would look like. And so they were able to license for a song these technologies and actually build products that open the world of computing to the masses. And, the rest in a lot of ways is history. But the core of that was not just some temporary measure, was not a little program. It was the identity of the firm that said, like, who we are is translators. We are going to make a world of opportunity accessible to people who have average skills when it comes to using a computer. And that was a powerful expression of who they were.
Absolutely. I just put down in the comment section for those of you listening live in on LinkedIn, and we'll share this as well out. If you guys follow us on LinkedIn at Melani Gordon or David Sheckman or evolution.team, you can connect with us. But David put together a really great, just simple kind of worksheet with some questions in here. And I think, a couple of things we can dive into is like, one question that I love in here, because it's like, how do you know something's not working, or how do you know that you don't have it or you do have it, right? And this can be for any leader that's inside of the company. I mean, hopefully this is happening from the top down. And so one of my favorite questions in this worksheet is, what's one negative example of my company straying from its identity, right? Like, how do I know? And in one of your experiences with client is that one of the signs, like my question to you is, one of the signs is they just had really troublesome employee turnover, right? And so that doesn't mean that employee turnover is always related to this, but
Right.
it is definitely one of the top ways to understand that leaders, managers, and C-suite, that number, that metric, that KPI, however you're tracking it, turnover, retention, whatever it is, wouldn't you say, Dave, is like a leading indicator of something bigger is at play here?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just share a very short story of the example that you're referencing. But you're right, that is a symptom of an identity related challenge in this case. And I hope that, as you're saying, people are able to reflect on this and see how there might be some signs, some leading indicators that represent some challenges that are deeper and require some focus and attention. So
Mhm.
I was brought in along with a colleague to work with really a mobile banking first organization that was right on the precipice of a very key growth move for them.
Mhm.
And they were experiencing massive challenges with employee engagement and retention. And that was going in the wrong direction very quickly. Upon some initial discovery and engagement with the client system, learned that this organization, which had attracted a lot of people for the mission of what they were doing, the desire to really help people in the economy who were challenged with fees and challenged with a lot of the banking practices for them, that was why they joined, but it really didn't feel like that was a part of the day-to-day conversation of their work or the mobilizing kind of energy of what they were trying to accomplish. Things seemed to revert back to short-term metrics and getting products developed by a certain timeline. And everyone who's working in an organization expects some form of that, but why are we here and what's unique about us had really been lost. And it was a chance to really
Yeah.
engage with this organization and update the mission statement so that it reflected the current needs of the organization and to engage in a broad-based dialogue with key leaders in the organization, especially about how do we bring that to life and how do you make leveling the financial playing field something that's front and center for people and something that their work makes a difference towards,
Mhm.
and the ability to feel a personal connection to the hard day-to-day work that people were putting into this. And so that symptom, as you said, of engagement being down, turnover going up, we're at a really important growth stage. There's something deeper here that we need, led to a robust conversation that led to a redefined mission and a set of strategic pillars that really rallied the group.
And so one of the questions you put in the worksheet here is, what tough conversations might we at our company need to be having?
Yeah.
And so, in that example of employee turnover is, what if we're a fly on the wall, like how do people start having those conversations and, talking about the elephant in the room?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad that you're bringing that up, Mel, because I think a lot of people have a view of sort of naive or limited view of talking about mission, talking about identity, talking about those lofty sort of terms and concepts. Is it's not all rainbows and butterflies. Talking
Mhm.
about the work in the world is as much about what we don't stand for and what we aren't going to do
Mm.
as it is about who we are and what we want to do. There is endless temptation in the world that we live in to deviate from identity. And some of that is just human nature. We like our fear-based impulses tend to override our more abundant ones. People are driven more by scarcity than they are by abundance. People are more responsive and reactive to outrage than to a positive way of engagement. So
Mhm.
every day, organizations are really challenged around the fact that there are 1,000 reasons to abandon the mission and not a lot sometimes of compelling reasons to stay on it. And
Yeah.
so what does that look like on the inside? That looks like sometimes a realistic and sober assessment of people's, especially key leaders, connection to that bigger picture purpose that requires challenging each other often about decisions that individuals are making. All of us have had that dilemma where we think, oh, I've got some key people or I've got an organization that's really producing results, but the results, and the way they're doing it is kind of at odds with our culture and who we are and what we stand for. Those are not easy dilemmas to resolve and to work through, but those are critical and necessary conversations to have. And those are the tough decisions that leaders need to make. So what often is necessary is gathering information, is getting clear on opportunities. But what's just as important is having those very candid and challenging conversations about where do we hold the line? What do we say no to? And how do we deal with people who are internal and at cross purposes with who we are?
Yeah. So much is coming up for me personally as a CEO
Yeah.
from a B2B SaaS company. And, after our first round, our Series A round, we brought in a coach when we were able to budget it. And I don't say this to plug ourselves, but it truly took someone outside of the company and not one of my investors or advisors to help me understand where I had blind spots as a leader and I was contributing to that, right? Like I was complicit in creating the conditions that I said I didn't want. And it was hard to hear, but it took my trusted business coach that I had at the time for, close to a decade. And one of the things that was coming up was we had developed this culture of my employees were afraid to ask for PTO.
Mm. Mm.
And I don't know if it was the day or the delivery or the timing and probably all of the above. And then the person who told me, but that was so far away from the identity of the company and culture that I wanted to create. And it took a bit to unravel from that because I then had to show up and model the behavior, right? And show the team
Yes.
that I was real about that change. And that is one of my very visceral, like, oh my gosh, I am adding to, like, what are my behaviors
Yeah.
that are adding to this? It wasn't just me,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
it starts at the top.
Yeah.
And so I had to do a lot of self-reflection and, what are the behaviors that I need to change today to turn this around while I still can? Because one of the leading indicators was turnover. And I used our sales org culture as a justification for that. Oh no, you guys, it's normal. We're a sales organization. And there was like a bigger underlying thing
Yeah.
taking place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing that personal experience from your work. I mean, that's just, so wonderful and touching and meaningful to hear. And a couple of things come up for me hearing you describe that. One is it takes two to see one. That's something I picked up from an old time mentor and really trusted advisor for me. And the same thing applies to me. I spend time talking about identity, and I work as an executive coach, and I need other people to help me look at my life, my situations, my issues to see them clearly.
Yeah.
And especially when being in a leadership role, as you know from your experience in your previous work with your organization, is it's incredible. It requires an incredible amount of ego. It requires an incredible amount of self-belief and determination to be able to launch, to persevere and endure. And sometimes that strength and conviction can work against you. If you're in a situation where something's misaligned, or there's been some sort of scope creep, or just an over reliance on, one aspect of the business. And the other thing that comes to mind for me too is that frog in a boiling pot type of concept.
Sure.
Where, if you take a frog and you throw him in a pot of boiling water, he'll jump right out. But if you put him in a pot of warm water, and then you just slowly turn the temperature up, the frog will just die in the pot of water. So it's that slow creep and that just kind of like agonizing progression, or maybe regression is a better word. And suddenly, even people who are very self-aware individuals can wake up one day and say, "How did I get here? How did this happen? I've been looking right at a challenge and not seeing it."
Besides like personal things in my life and my husband and that sort of thing, one of the things that I'm most grateful for is that I saw it, took action, and had enough of my teammates and direct reports to stay around to watch the change, because I have watched other leaders and very successful CEO friends of mine who did not have that opportunity and had to restart entire teams.
Yeah.
In the middle of a fundraise or a growth spurt, they had to start all over. They had to hire a new chief of staff to try to prop up the new pretend thing, but they didn't do the work to fix it. And I can still count those people that really did see the change that was being made through the behavior, and that it was coming, and stuck around for it. It is possible, because we all know and see the stats of, people not happy in jobs or with managers or leaders and that sort of thing. But I wanted to read off a few more of the questions here in your worksheet, reflection questions, and you guys can grab this online. In one sentence or less, what is the identity of my organization? Hey, look, not just the CEO of the company should be able to describe or explain this, but a frontline account executive or project manager should be able to explain this to their mom or dad or a friend, right? What's one positive example of my company's identity guiding decision making? What's one negative example of my company straying from its identity? And then, of course, we talked a few of the others. What I love about these questions, in the past, David, our B2B SaaS company used a tool at the time that a lot of people might have heard of called 15-5.
Yeah.
And these are the types of questions that I would put into those 15-5s. Now, it's hard because it's not anonymous. And so another thing that can really help leaders who might have a sense is even like skip level one-to-ones. And then, of course, we'll shamelessly plug ourselves, is bringing in that outside perspective. Because if you're CEO or, CRO, and people, you're trying to go to each other and there's infighting in the C-suite and no outside perspective, it normally takes someone from the outside coming in, someone doing a 360, someone really starting to say, look, we need to put a pause here. So make sure you grab our worksheet. And if today's discussion resonated with you, David and I are offering a complimentary 30-minute strategy session. You can grab our Calendly link online and in the worksheet. And we're doing this on October 3rd and November 7th at the same time, 11 a.m., a little bit different topic. We're live, come join. This is also recorded, so you can share it with your team. You can forward to a colleague. David, I'm so excited we got to do this. We've been talking about this for a little bit. So just want to thank you so much, and then give you a chance to kind of have any wrap up or concluding words for all of us that are fighting the good fight out there?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm so grateful to you and for this collaboration. It's been wonderful. So thanks very much. Yeah. What I would say in closing is that this work is challenging around identity. And what I want to make sure everyone knows who downloads the document and looks at these questions that Mel has been referencing already is that I would expect there to be gaps, misalignments, challenges. That's not a bad sign. I like to think of, certainly startups, but any business that is really doing good work in the world is extraordinarily challenging. That's the point. It's doing, a good strategy is doing something that looks impossible and making it real. It's hard work. And, that sounds like other big aspects of people's lives that are hard work. Being in a marriage is hard work. Raising children is hard work. Being, an engaged citizen in in whatever country you live in is hard work. And it doesn't, you're never done with that to some degree. It's a work in progress. And I think people are really, really, committed to their work, their business, having a positive impact in the world. That is hard work. And the fact that there are challenges or growth opportunities, that's an amazing chance to step up. And that's a great opportunity to assemble a team and bring in a resource, whatever is most important in the moment. But that's inspiring to me. And I think people who do that are really heroes in their own way. And identity is not set it and forget it. There's no cruise control option. And that ongoing work is, I think, powerful, meaningful. And when people do it right, it's not only great for consumers, customers, clients, it's also a gift to employees, and it's a positive contribution to the world.
I love it. Lean into the conflict. Don't be afraid of it. And the Mels and the Davids of the world have been doing this for quite a while, even though we're only 27. And there's great resources out there. Find us online at evolution.team. We have 2 more parts coming up to this series. And David and I are 2 humans that we embrace leaning into conflict, but also helping our clients and organizations do that. So thank you so much. This has been a blast. Love it. All right. Thanks everyone for listening in, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.